Hello Stampers, my name is Linda Bedinger and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in Denver, Colorado. I'm so glad you could join me today. I have a very fun card for you today. It is a floating image and people often do them as floating frames, and I've done a sample of both the entire card covered by the floating images as well as a sample of the floating frame. And so I'm going to show you today how to do the floating frame, and that automatically shows you how to do the full image. So let's just get started. Here are my sample cards. This one is the floating image where the image itself covers the entire front of the card. And you can see here, if I tilt it to the side, that it is set up on dimensionals, and it looks like all of these items on the front of the card are free floating. And then this is a sample of one where the image is just the frame, and then this cutout piece, I filled this entire card full of images, and so I cut out the centerpiece and made a card with just that centerpiece as well. So let me show you what we're going to do. This was done with the Pansy Suite. This one is done with the hand pinned, and that's what we're going to do today. So I have some So Saffron, and I embossed the front page of my So Saffron card base here. This is a regular standard card base, 8.5 by 5.5, scored and folded at 4 1/4. And I have two because we're going to get 2 cards out of this project. And I used this Pretty Flowers embossing folder and on the fronts of these cards, and set these up so that when I put this in here, I make sure that the floral piece is all the way to the top of the card, all the way to the bottom, and that the edge right up to the fold line is covered by that image. And then I put this through my machine this way. And so what I've got here are 2 cards that have that card front embossed with that Pretty Flowers embossing folder. I thought particularly for this style, since it's so plain around the edges, that it pays to have something there. And on this one, the inside is kind of bare, and so it is nice to have something looking back at you there. So I have those 2 pieces, and then I have 2 pieces of Calypso Coral that are cut 4 by 5 1/4, one for the each of the insides of these cards, and then I have some basic white cut 3 3/4 by 5 to layer on top of those for the interior of the card. For this card, what I did was I cut out a bunch of images using the 2 stamps in the hand-penned stamp set. So I used this flower, which is this one here, and I used this flower, which is this one here. And I die cut all of those out, and I colored those. And I did use my blends to do my coloring. I'm going to grab a piece of scratch paper here because I want to show you about the coloring. And I thought on this one I would use that Calypso Coral. This is my dark Calypso Coral, and here is my light Calypso Coral, and then I have light and dark Old Olive. And so on this, what I did was I used my light Calypso Coral to go over the interior of the flowers and leaving the centers open because I want to color those in yellow. So again, just right around the edges of these flowers, nothing fancy, just kind of getting our color down and filling all but the centers. And then we'll use the darker Calypso Coral to add a little bit of detail. So I'm just going to go ahead and speed through this because they said there's absolutely nothing fancy about this, just getting the color. Okay, now that I have my basic color down, I want to take my darker Calypso Coral and go along the shaded areas here and just along the edges of the flower here to add a little dimension. I'm going to go back in and blend with my lighter. And I started to color my leaves and then I stopped because I wanted to show you what I was doing. So I'm using the lighter Old Olive to come in and color those leaves. And then I'm going to accent that with the darker Old Olive just along these interior stems and places where it shows that it's shaded. So really simple coloring, and yet I think the effect is very nice. And you can outline the edges of one side of these to add a little bit more dimension if you choose to, or not. Some of them I did and some of them I didn't. Now then, I do have my light Daffodil Delight, and I'm just going to color these flower centers in this pretty bright yellow. And there we go. So that is all there is to the coloring. Now I have pre-colored a bunch of my pieces so that you wouldn't have to watch me make the sausage, so to speak. So I've done a couple of different ones. This one is the Misty Moonlight and the blue, and then I used the color lifter because the color was so dark. So I have that, and then I have a yellow here that I did, and then I cut using the dies in this set. Let me show you some of the dies in this set. These are the two large dies that cut out this flower here, and this one cuts out this flower right here. And so I went ahead and I cut out all of my colored pieces, and then I cut some additional flowers, and this set has this flower and some all different kinds of sizes here and a couple of different leaves. And so I cut some of this double leaf and then some of this leaf that has 4 pieces to it, because I wasn't sure exactly where I might want to stick an extra leaf, so I cut kind of a bunch of them. So I've got some cut flowers here in the colors of my flowers. So there's a pink, there's a Calypso Coral, a couple of lighter yellows. I kind of lost some of them here. There's a large yellow, and I have some smaller of these little flowers cut in all of the colors here. So we have plenty of choices, and then lots of leaves that have been cut in the 2 or the 4 piece dies here. And so we have lots and lots and lots that we can do with all of our choices here. I'm going to save this one for the interior of the frame for this card. So let's just get started here piecing this. Now, the way you do this, I have two pieces that are 4 by 5 1/4. These are layers for inside, but this is what we're actually going to build our floating image on. So we're going to take one of these, and in order to do this and be able to place things and see where I got them, you should be able to just lay these down, but what I find is they kind of shift and move. So I've got my little tape runner here, and what I thought I would do is just put ever so slight a little piece of glue on the back of this and de-stick it. I just want to hold these in place, and so I thought, following a little bit of the pattern that I did here, if I were to put this one right up here in the corner, then I would clearly get a corner image, and my flower and leaf go a bit off the page, which is just fine. And then if I were to take this blue one and let it fill in this corner here, I'll just see what the best way is to do that. What I want to do is get most of the flower on there and some of the leaves. And that's looking pretty good to me right there. And depending on how you put it together, they'll be a little bit different every time. And that's kind of the joy of this. Let's see, I really want that to come up a little bit and in a little bit, catch most of that flower. So there I've got two of my images down, and then I have this pretty Calypso Coral flower, and if I put that one right here along this edge on the bottom, I can see that I can fill up this corner pretty well with this one. So again, just a little bit of sticky so that it doesn't move around. And there we go. That fills up that corner nicely. Now I have this pretty pink flower, and if I put that right in here, that pretty well fills this card, but I'm going to lose this. So I think what I'm going to do, and this is half of this journey, is to put this together in such a way that it works for you and is looks the way you'd like it to. So if I stick this one right down here in this corner, I just cut that leaf off, so, and let this fill this whole corner here. That looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to do that and set that piece there. Now we've got a couple of open spots, and we have some of these smaller flowers. I have blue and yellow, and since I have yellow on that side, maybe we can get away with a little yellow one right over here and a leaf. So if I were to take this leaf, and I'm going to trim off a little bit of this, and maybe, in fact, I don't even need that second leaf. I'm just going to trim it off, and I'm going to put these two pieces right down here, and I'm just filling the gaps at this point. About like that. So I'm going to add a little bit of snail on the back of that one to hold it down, and maybe put it in that way, and then just ever so slightly a little piece of glue on the back of that. And I think I want to tuck that fairly far underneath this flower. But I don't want it to show through the little holes, so maybe like that. Okay, that kind of fills in there. Now we've got a couple of other spots here, and I'm thinking that maybe this little flower could fill in right there. And maybe this leaf that I cut off on this other side could go right in here near the top. I think that'll work. Now I've just got one more little gap here, and I've got this little blue flower, which I think will work just fine if I put it right in here. Yep, I think that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so now we've got, and I can tell you that you're better off with larger images. This was a real pain because I decided to use these butterflies. Well, they've got so much open area, it was hard to find a place to put a dimensional on the back of those to make this floating frame idea. So use larger images. That's something that I learned in doing this process. Small filigreed images really don't work well. Make sure whatever piece you're putting down has enough space to at least put a little bit of dimensionals. Okay, I think that is nice and full. I maybe could get away with one more leaf right in here. Maybe I will do that just to fill it a little bit. You don't want to put too much sticky down because this white frame underneath really just holds things together, and then it's disposable. It goes away. So, all right, so now we've got all of those. Now, this technique calls for using the Glad press and seal material. And I've got my piece of press and seal here that's roughly square. I went ahead and cut this ahead of time. But basically, one side of this is sticky, that'd be this side, and then one side isn't sticky at all. And what you want to do is get your image completely covered with this press and seal stuff and cover the whole thing. And what we're going to do is that is going to stick to our images on the front of this card, and that's going to allow us to pull it up and keep everything intact so we can get this illusion of the floating image. Okay, so I've got that on there, and I'm feeling fairly comfortable here that this is all nice and pressed down on. I don't care about the white background, but I definitely want it pressed down on my flowers and leaves here, just like that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my large scissors and I'm going to trim this off. I'm going to go from the back side here, and I'm going to trim off these edges. And the whole point in having this 4 by 5 1/4 piece is I want to have a frame that is roughly 4 by 5 1/4 with an open center, and we'll show you that here in just a second. So now I'm going to come across here and cut all of those pieces off. And you want to trim it as closely as you can to the edges of this card. And the press and steel sticks to everything, including my scissors. So there we go. One more side to go here. So there we have it. Now, we have our card, and the edges are cut to the 4 by 5 1/4. Now we have this from the stitched rectangle dies, and this is the 4th largest of those rectangle dies. And I'm going to eyeball this here to kind of get it in the center of my card so that I get a nice even border all the way around. And I'm going to push my washi tape in place. Now I'm going to go over to my die cutting machine, and I am going to cut this piece so that we end up with 2 pieces, the frame and then the inside flowers. I'll be back in a flash. Okay, so I have cut through my and it's you do have to sometimes use a shim because I'm going through 2 layers of cardstock here to get this to cut the centerpiece out. And what I found is sometimes I needed to use a shim in order to do that, another piece of cardstock on the top. But you can see, and you can turn it over and tell it has cut all the way through. So now I'm going to remove these pieces from the die. There we go. There's my interior piece. And then I'm going to remove the die from this top layer. And what we want to do is be able to see through all of this placement of these flowers. So the next thing we're going to do is take off the press and seal and have it stay connected to the flowers. We're separating this frame from this assembly at this point. And once you get it started, if you've got good solid images on here, this goes pretty easily. There we go. Now, I have my piece completely released, and this piece is discarded. Now, I have what is going to be my floating frame. So we're going to turn this over, and I'm going to release this one as well. And there we go. Got all of my pieces off, and this piece can be discarded. Now, what I have is the press and seal is what's holding all of our images in place. So now we're going to turn these over and add some dimensionals to the back of these so that they will stay put. Okay. I have some mini dimensionals and some full-size dimensionals here, and we are going to add dimensionals on the back of our pieces here. And the trick on this is to make sure that, see, there's a little tiny edge, and I think what I'll do is just abandon that. I think it's going to be too hard to put on there, and let the rest of it make the card. So you want to add dimensionals around the card, and you have to think about putting dimensionals on each piece. And all pieces are covered and supported. So like here, I have this leaf kind of sticking out here. I'm going to put a dimensional on it because I want that to be completely supported on the face of my card. So there, this one I'm going to be able to get away with mostly large dimensionals on this one. There we go. I think I'm going to add another one here, and then I'm going to take one mini and put it right here because it'll hold those two pieces together. So, oh, this piece here. So what I'm going to do is take my mini dimensionals and I'm going to cut a couple of them in half. And then I'm going to take those halves and stick them on this little flower in a couple of strategic spots. So that flower is, because it's independent and kind of floating in the middle, needs to be supported as well. Same thing with this one. I'm going to put a mini dimensional on this side and one over here. I'd like to put on one more. So I'm going to cut another. I'll probably need more of them anyway, so I'm going to cover a couple of the minis in half, and I'm going to stick one there. So all of my pieces are going to be supported. I'm going to stick a dimensional here for that leaf, and then some here as well. You use a lot of dimensionals with this technique, but what you want to do is make sure that your piece stays completely supported. So that one looks pretty good. So now on this one, so I think I've got that completely covered. So the next thing we're going to do is remove the release paper on all of these dimensionals. So now we are ready to put these things into place. So what I'm going to do is very carefully center this on this card, put that in place, and then peel the press and seal off of the floral images. It's all we have left to do. And there you have your floating image in the center of that card front. All right, next to put on the frame. And there you have the two cards that we get out of doing the frame and the interior. And this actually is easier because you're not cutting out that frame and trying to do the little pieces. It's actually easier to do the entire thing. But there we have our floating frame. And then I saved this image to go on the inside of this one. So I'm going to add a few dimensionals to it. This one I think is going to end up going right in here like that. And all we have left to do is add a sentiment. And on this one, I think I might just leave that one be a note card and not put a sentiment in it at all. And so to complete this one, we would add to the inside of our card. And then add our piece of 3 3¾ by 5 here to the inside here. And maybe we would take one of these little flowers and put it in here, and maybe add a little bit of leaf detail there. Let's see here. Maybe put that in place, and then add this piece right here on top. And that one is complete. Now this one probably needs just a small sentiment. I thought we would make this one a happy birthday, and I have my happy birthday stamp from, I think this is the Peach Sweet. I'll make sure I put it up on top. Let's see what that looks like. Well, it looks just fine if it were straight. Perhaps we can try that again. I have this nice long piece here. And if I set that down on my grid paper, there we go. That's a little bit better. Cut off my happy birthday and add that right down here at the bottom. I think if I add some snail to the top, I can add a couple of dimensionals along the bottom. I'm thinking I'm going to offset that just a little bit and put that in place right down here on the bottom. Then we need a little bit of embellishment, and I have my rhinestones here, and let's see, I can add a couple of rhinestones to the interior of some of these flowers. This one is pretty easy if I just embellish the inside flower piece. With this one, you want to make sure you give yourself enough time and don't rush through it, because where you put your flowers on the face of the card matters, and you want to just take your time with adding all of the various pieces. There, I think that's kind of fun. And then we can add a couple more pieces around the edge on this one. And I think that looks pretty good. Now on this one, okay, there we are. That is my project for the day. Thank you so much for stopping by my YouTube studio today. I do so appreciate it. And if you don't have a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, I'd love to be your demonstrator. Or you could join my team. So here's the two that we made today. This is the pansy sample that I did ahead of time. And this is the full page. And this is floating image and floating frame. Still June for another day or so. So my prize draw for the month is the art gallery bundle, the dies and the stamp set. And all you have to do to get yourself in the drawing is to put an order of any size on my store, lbedinger.stampinup.net, and you can get to it through my blog, www.inkandingenuity.com. So that's it for me. Let's see. Stampin' Up! Is going to have a designer series paper sale in the month of July, starting on July 1st and going through August the 2nd. So you'll want to take a look at that. It's a 15% off, and there's probably 8 or 10 different designer series paper that are going to work on this, and it's unlimited. So you can buy as much of it as you want at the discounted price. Let's see, I think that's it for me. I'll be back soon with more cards, more projects, and more tips. Bye!